We are Progressive Talk Radio on TV. Today we're in clandestine mode, and I'm here with our original host, Moses, and his last name is Ross. This is Moses Ross. Thank you for joining me, Moses. I'm so glad you're here. And we wanted to start off this conversation by asking Moses what he's been up to.
Oh my goodness. Sherry, first off, I want to say thank you for helping me navigate these last few months as far as the show and making sure that the show's, maintained over these. I volunteered to be chair of my local neighborhood association here in Portland, in Multnomah neighborhood. And it's been a little bit more of an obligation than I thought, because the timing is my board meetings are always on the same day and time as the show. So I've been unfortunately been able having to do that. But I sure have missed being able to sit here and share my opinion, share my thoughts, and participate in the show. So thank you for inviting me.
I am so glad you're here. And I just did a really quick test on Facebook, and we are live on my page. So yay.
Nice. Okay, good. Very good. I might even forward that a little bit here. I wonder if I can do, well, I'll just no need to mess with it. I'm just glad that we're live streaming. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So what I will do is I'll put in the description when we get off of the live, I'll put in because it's not allowing me to write a description or anything. I will let everybody know that you were Moses Ross, who you are and what you do and why you were here.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
First off, we wanted to talk with each other about the Roe v. Wade decision coming down from SCOTUS. So we know that many states across the nation had trigger laws. What's your information on that?
Well, this was a premeditated strategy by the Republicans that has been going on for decades, since, quite frankly, even before Clarence Thomas was nominated and appointed to the Supreme Court. They handled it very, I give a lot of respect to the Republican Party being wise enough to look at the long game. And they took the long game when it came to defeating getting Roe v. Wade overturned. They knew that it was going to happen through the courts. They knew that they would have to appoint people to the courts that would be favorable to that position. And they created an infrastructure through the Federalist Society and through these judicial groups out there to identify judges and lawyers, conservative lawyers that shared the same opinion, and to be able to nurture them and bring them up through the system, through the circuit courts and through the state courts and on up into the federal systems, to be able to position themselves, to be able to have that opportunity, to be able to have a stooge like Trump, to be able to appoint their favored judges that shared that perspective to the court. And their accomplice was, of course, Mitch McConnell. McConnell was able, broke centuries of precedent in the Senate to be able to force these appointees through, like with the Amy Coney Barrett. She was put in and voted on and appointed 4 weeks before the 2020 elections, even though hypocritical turtle man McConnell denied Merrick Garland his appointment to the Supreme Court, Obama's appointment, saying that it was too close to a primary or too close to an election. Yeah. So the hypocrisy just abounds, but I give them tons of respect for sticking to their strategy over the long term, playing the long game.
However, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just going to say, there's always a but to this. They completely underestimated the reaction of Americans to the restriction of a right to a right that had been guaranteed being taken away from us.
Yep.
And that they completely underestimated that. And so here we are now. we're in an election season where the whole geography has changed. You know, we have now people increases in women registering to vote, and by the way, they're registering to vote Democratic,
right?
By double digits.
Yep.
And there's so many examples of it. I mean, well, there's been a few examples of this trend, I can't call it a trend, this movement, this reaction to Roe v. Wade and the Republican efforts, of the extreme Republican efforts. And, you know, you got Kansas, you've got, where in Kansas, they tried to put it into the Constitution there that abortion was illegal, and, you know, crazy stuff. And, yep. and it lost by over 60% margin, you know, yep. 60%. So point is, you know, and that just blew those Republicans away. It blew them all away because they were not expecting that. You know, Kansas is a very conservative state.
Across the country, we're seeing instances of children being raped by whomever and being forced to go elsewhere because the state that they're in isn't allowing abortion, even for rape, incest, or the health of the mother. That's a 10-year-old. Yes, that was resolved, but still there's precedent for that, right? Well, also, I want to talk about the guy, Levin, I believe his name is, the list of Federalist Society judges that Trump gave to McConnell and had him go off to his people was actually written by somebody else who has been involved in the Republican Party since before Nixon. And I believe his name is Levin or something.
Oh, I remember Lev Parnan.
Lev Parnan. Yeah.
I remember hearing about that, reading about that. Yeah. And it correlates. And that just goes to show the lengths, the long-term premeditation that was involved with all of this.
So before any of this happened, when we know before 50 years ago, abortion was completely banned in this nation. We know women died from childbirth. We know women died from complications because of sepsis, because of other complications that are, I mean, having a child is not an uninvasive thing, right? I mean, it takes over your entire body. Having had 3, I think I know. This other woman in Louisiana who's being forced to carry her skullless child to term, right? Didn't they know from before the last 50 years that this was going to happen again? Did that even enter their minds? Do they just not care?
Well, I think at one time there were in the recent past, say 10 years ago, there were moderate Republicans. There were pro-choice Republicans. Mm-hmm. But because of the idolization of Trump, because of that influence of the extremists within the Republican Party and the takeover of the Republican Party by the extremists, you know, you have these moderates that have to either acquiesce, go along with it, or not. And, you know, it's just kind of drawing this line in the sand, isn't it?
It is.
And I think what I really admire about our president, Joe Biden, is how recently, at least in the last few months or so, he's begun a real aggressive campaign to call it what it is and to call out the extremism.
Finally.
You know, he called here the other day, he called MAGA Republicans semi-fascists.
Yeah, take semi out of there.
Right. Well, let's explore that phrase.
Like blatant fascism.
Agreed. Well, what's intriguing is those are two terms that he's been recently using. MAGA Republicans. Okay, so in other words, he is separating out the extremist Republicans from the moderate Republicans there. All right, because he knows that the MAGA Republicans are a smaller percentage of the overall group. Okay.
Right.
So then you have that. So now the second phrase was, okay, the MAGA Republicans. And the second phrase, what was the second phrase? The
Semi-fascism.
semi-fascist. Oh, yeah. Semi-fascist. Notice he doesn't call them all fascist. He
No.
doesn't accuse them of that. He calls them semi-fascist, because of some of the actions. And so he's almost leaving breathing room there for those moderates to leave that extremist group. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting framing. And I love how aggressive he's getting and it calls out the hypocrisy of the arguments that the GOP has been pushing against the Democrats, calling us the ongoing insults and barrage of insults and that have been given to liberals and have been given to Democrats that are assigned to Democrats. I mean, God, I don't even want to repeat any of them. Yeah. But the point is, it's the idea that we are finally standing up and calling out that and calling them out for what they're doing. Enough of this, take it. I think we for years have gotten almost numb to the idea that they're insulting us like that, personally insulting us like that. And so we, as Democrats, our values, we don't want to do that to other people, really. I mean, why would we want to denigrate somebody?
Well, it's projection. It's projection, and that it's coming along more and more on being an element of projection. Take the student loan repayment program updates, right? So they had all of the the semi-fascist element of the Republican Party complaining about Joe Biden helping middle to low income students and pre-pass students who can't find a job, right? So $10,000 on your federal student loan, $20,000 if you have a Pell Grant. And they don't seem to understand the point that when I borrowed $5,800 in 2006, I still owe $6,200 on that $5,800, and I've been paying for over 10 years on that, right? And that's just one, and I won't go on that. But the hypocrisy and the projection is Marjorie Taylor Greene and 188K in PPP loans. There's another guy with 1.6 million in PPP loans that were forgiven. So it's projection when they start talking about pedophiles, about transgen people or same-sex people being pedophiles. How many Republicans have been arrested in the last 6 months for pedophilia and the churches and all of this other stuff? It's projection, 110%. Amen. And I want us to stop being victims of their nastiness.
Oh, well said. And victims of their nastiness. No kidding. And I will say this, that Joe Biden, President Biden, I think and his team has finally begun to understand that they have to come out and call it out and
finally.
And just say something. But I think part of it too, I mean, there's some strategy involved with all of this. He really wasn't at a point where he could call them out back when he had those low numbers, when everything wasn't going his way.
That's true.
But nicely, 3 months before the election, all this stuff has happened with Roe v. Wade, with the guns, with Trump's treason. And people are finally beginning to wake up. And now he's shifting into this new mode of aggressiveness, of calling it out. And, come November, I predict, here's what I predict. I predict that we will retain the Senate. We will gain in the Senate. We'll gain seats in the Senate because some of those Senate candidates are just awful for the Republicans. Herschel Walker in Georgia is just a mess. Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania is so
ridiculous.
Tim Ryan in Ohio. There's Nevada. So anywho, point is that I think we're going to gain a larger majority there. And then in the House, I tell you, I think we will retain the House. I do not. The Republicans had a beautiful strategy. They had taken over the state legislatures in many of these states that through gerrymandering solidified their majorities.
Yep.
And so they realized that even though the Democrats have the majority now by 15 votes, that this upcoming midterm, the historical trend is that it goes against the party of the president.
Exactly.
And so that, in combination with the gerrymandering that they were doing at the state level and then bringing it on up, they really thought that they were going to take the House back and be able to go back in, and you get Representative Jim Johnson and all of those wackos on committees doing investigations about laptops.
Jim Johnson, that's funny. Ron Johnson and Jim Jordan.
Jim Jordan. I didn't even realize that. That's funny. Jim Johnson.
But you're right there. You're right on point, man.
I mean,
that's
hilarious. So I think that the House, from what I've been reading, the trends are happening towards the Dems with the turnout with women, more women turning out to register to vote because of the Roe v. Wade thing. More moderate Republicans going against, realizing that Trump's a traitor, that, and he's going to go to jail because of those documents. Oh, I got to share this with everybody here before.
We haven't got there yet. We're getting there. Hold on.
Okay. You tell me when. But
I'm on TikTok a lot. I'm on TikTok daily, right? And I do a little bit of content, but I watch more content than I really do at this point. There's actually a group of Republican women who are leaving the party and registering to be Democrats because of what SCOTUS did and what is happening in the current political environment, especially in Trump and the abortion and the gun rights and everything like this. They're leaving.
Yeah, I can't rightly blame them, because that's, the party's not representing who they are anymore, and the GOP does not. And that's what happens when you have extremists take over a supposed mainstream party.
Well, a lot of us wondered how women could vote Republican for the past 30 years. They are not voting within their interests by voting Republican, period.
No, I hear you. And I think a lot of that was created by, not created, I think religious belief had a lot to do with that. Christianity had a lot to do with that. The Republican Party had really focused since the moral majority days of Nixon, his strategy of the silent majority, targeting the religious right to come out and vote for him against the hippies and the liberals of McGovern. So same thing here. But the challenge, is just calling them out or trying to give them an excuse. I mean, what Nixon was doing was tapping into racial animus by saying that majority, that's that silent majority. He was also trying to tap into the idea that the religious communities felt like they were being power is being taken away from the religious communities.
So, they're being persecuted, right?
Right. So now take what they started out doing then, and now apply it to what's happened now. It's just gone to extremes to the point where they've all jumped off like lemmings. They've all just jumped off the cliff as far as their extremism, and are following the extremism. So I have zero sympathy for them. I want to bring the folks that are convincible back.
Right.
I really do. I think, and I think that's a large majority of the American population, a large majority.
Let's give you your time with your picture.
Oh, yeah.
FBI.
I just wanted to show, I needed to show this to everybody because this is the latest from Mar-a-Lago and the Department of Justice's investigation.
As a refresher, everyone, in case you haven't been paying attention, because not everybody keeps their eyes on the feeds, you have jobs to do. 13 days ago, Mar-a-Lago was invaded by the FBI, and Trump about had a heart attack, and he's been backpedaling ever since because he pretty much professed himself guilty right after it happened. And Moses has a shot that came out this morning.
This was an interesting photograph here. I got to show this to you guys. I think I'm doing this right here. Oh, I'm not. Here, wait a second. I need to.
It says you started screen share.
Yeah, it does, but I need to.
Okay, so I'm seeing classified documents, likely concealed, removed.
Here, wait a second. Let me. Oh, wait a second. I know what's that. Okay, here we go.
You just had it.
I know it. It went away. Oh, here it is.
There it is. And I saw a court document on there too. What did that? We'll have to look at that. What did that say?
This is the photo I wanted to share with you.
Woo!
Okay, so this is what they found at This is a picture of
look at this
church at Mar-a-Lago, and look at what they have found. I don't know if we can't zoom in, but I've seen some photos where they have zoomed in. It says secret SCI. That's one level. Top secret.
That is like super. That's super secret. SCI is super secret.
There are some codes that are contained on these document cover sheets here, the blue that are there, that refer to human intelligence, human assets.
Yep.
There are top secrets. Yep. I mean, all of the levels. I mean, you have one of those in your possession and you go to jail.
I held a secret clearance for 5 years, a government secret clearance for 5 years. If I took a single piece of this, I would be in jail. Like 20 years, I think is the term.
Now, two things on a more humorous note, I got to point out to everybody. A, the tackiness of the carpet at Mar-a-Lago.
Have you seen pictures of that place? It's so nasty.
Look at that awful carpet. Okay, so just Trump's poor taste. And then off to the right, you see those framed Time magazines.
I saw that, yeah.
So, just what an egomaniac.
Apparently, this stuff, from what I understand, and it's it's subject. All of this SCI and top secret information was collected together with his passport, and there's notes and all sorts of stuff in there.
I read about the passports too somewhere. Both of them were expired passports, and that happened to be that were in a drawer in his desk.
Yeah, they were in his room.
Inside the drawer, there were some of those top secret documents.
Yes.
That's why they confiscated the passports, because it was all along in there. And I think they've given him back the passports.
Yeah, they have.
It's just he's flailing right now. Trump is, because he doesn't have legal representation that's worth a darn. And so he's getting lousy advice on how to deal with this. And B, he's got irrefutable evidence that the son of a gun is a traitor that he's broken the law. I mean, what can you say?
Well, you've got other people, except for, did you hear Karl Rove? Karl Rove I was like, oh my goodness, really? Somebody's really in trouble. But the pundits are out there. Oh, they broke the law by going into his house, and they shouldn't do this. Is horrible, and this is against the Constitution, and there's going to be rioting in the streets. First off, we saw hardly any protests except for what seems to be in front of Mar-a-Lago, and secondly, dude, I had a secret clearance. That guy's getting off easy. There's millions of us that had we taken even just one piece of that, what's her name? Reality. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about Reality, and she's a perfect example of what would have happened to you, me, Joe Blow down the street, a veteran, whatever, who doesn't have money, power, prestige, or lies to people.
Right. Well, the strategy that Trump's using has worked for him for decades when it comes to legal fights.
In the private sector.
Right. It's a different situation here. And he's finding that the Department of Justice actually dotted all of their I's and crossed their T's, and and is doing it the right way. He can't, like, for instance, everybody's saying that they wanted the actual affidavit, with the listing of all of that stuff, of all the items. He was saying that he wanted that. Well, as the person that was being served it, he could have released it at any time.
Yes, I heard that. Yeah, I heard about that.
The reason he didn't want to release it is because it contained information about what his crime was.
Yep.
And so he's just using the media, using everybody, using his Truth Social account to send out press releases. He's flailing right now. And so my point is that just like with you, I think he's going to be called to account on this one. This one's going to be the one that,
we'll see.
Like the Al Capone taxes.
We'll
mean?
See. We'll see.
It's hard to dispute what we just saw in that photo.
I loved watching a mob boss go down. Gotti, I got to watch him go down. I love to watch mob bosses go down. But I don't really know. I've never known of a mob boss being president before.
It's so similar. It is so similar, Sherry. I mean, you've got a mob boss there. You've got, no one talks about, I think, who was it? Matt Gaetz was talking with Roger Stone about the pardon for Roger, because right before the pardon came down, and he was saying that the big guy knows that you need a pardon, knows that you've served him well, or something like that. In other words, just using the parlance, the vernacular of mafia bosses.
Of the boss, yeah.
Describe the guy. So there's this. It's crazy. Now, let's take this down to the state races. How is this affecting things on a state level? Okay, because we know that it's affecting the Senate races, and those are statewide races usually, always. We know that it's beginning to hit the House races, because you know that it's hitting the governor race. You showed, what was it? That Blake Masters is running against. No, that's the Senate race, pardon me, in Arizona. Mm-hmm. Blake Masters, Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's the incumbent, and he's an astronaut, for Christ's sake.
Yes, he is. And Gabby Gifford's husband.
Yeah, Blake Masters is some guy who has recently scrubbed his website of any mention of Trump or
that's the guy. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's obviously affecting that race.
Right.
Let's talk about Oregon's race. How's this affecting Oregon and the Oregon races? You've got there's four big races right now in Oregon. There's the statewide, and we could have an hour conversation on the statewide. Tina Kotek is the Democrat, Christine Drazen is the Republican, and the independent, non-affiliated Senator Betsy Johnson. And we'll have a conversation. I'd like to have a conversation on that one, because that race, in my opinion, Kate is running that was a slip. Kate. Tina. I'm that's funny. I'm framed. You think I was Betsy and Christine, because their strategy is to associate Tina with Kate, and
they're not far off, honestly, but I'm voting for Tina. So,
Tina is the only pro-choice candidate there.
Right.
She's, or at least endorsed by the pro-choice groups. Betsy Johnson is pro-choice, but she is also pro-gun, and she's also
that's all right.
Well,
being pro-gun is not an issue. Being against common sense gun control is.
Okay, so maybe I should frame it that way. Common sense gun control, because she has an A+ rating from the NRA.
Yeah, that's crap.
Yeah, so does Drazen, though. So I mean, if you're looking at it from those broad strokes. So that's going to be an interesting race. And real quick, my prediction, Tina Kotek wins with 37%.
I hope so.
It's going to be, another quick comment on that race. I see it similar to the 1992 presidential race of Bill Clinton and Ross Perot and Bush. Yeah, it was Bush.
Yeah, Bush was in there.
And Perot ran the same strategy as Betsy Johnson here. I'm independent. I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm not getting outside money. Well, she can't say
I'm paying my own thing. That was his big thing. I'm a billionaire and I'm paying my own way and blah, blah, blah.
Right. And so, but, and he imploded there at the very end. But the point was that he made enough of an impact where Clinton was able to win with less than a minority, with a majority minority.
Right.
38.
I voted for him.
Yeah, I voted for Clinton twice, proudly.
Me too.
But the issue here is now, is that dynamic affecting this race? And yes, it is. I think Tina's going to get about 37%, and Tina and Betsy and Christine will get underneath that. Somebody called me out on that and said I should give numbers for all three of them. And I said, oh man, I'd have to do some math. But 37. But
you predict. I mean, I have been mad at you a couple of times, but you have a really accurate prediction rate.
Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'd like to, it's going to be a huge horse race though. And it's going to be so much money spent on that race. It's already going to be the most expensive gubernatorial race in history right now, because you've got billionaires sending $1 million checks to both Christine and Betsy. You've got special interest groups like the Planned Parenthood and those groups sending big, huge checks to Tina, unions helping out Tina. There's going to be a lot of spending. It'll be interesting to see who comes out on top. But,
at some point, I want to talk with you about groups like that are trying to have Citizens United taken down and a few of the other PAC initiatives taken down. So I am totally behind the Citizens United takedown, 110%. But wouldn't that impact the PACs that help on the left, like Planned Parenthood, or say Intel wanted to donate to a Democratic candidate?
No, that's one of the, that's certainly an argument. I mean, that's certainly a point, is that everybody has to bite the bullet when it comes to campaign finance reform. Everybody has to follow the same rules, level the playing field. And that was one of the reasons right there that this last time around, we were not able to negotiate with the group that I work with, a good governance group, was attempting to put onto the Oregon ballot in November a ballot measure to implement campaign finance reform. Okay.
Yeah.
And we had all the signatures, we had everything done, but then it got pushed back. We had Shamia Fagan, the Secretary of State, pushed it and rejected it because of a technicality, basically. So, okay, fine. We're going to have to do it again another time.
I remember that happening.
Right. So the challenge was that prior to that, we had been in negotiations, we had been discussions with the different groups that would be affected by this legislation, to make sure that everybody was on the same page and could support it. And some of those other groups brought up that exact argument. Well, all of a sudden, let's put it this way, 501c4s, not 501c3s. 501c3s are nonprofit and they can't participate in politics in that sense.
Supposedly.
Correct, supposedly. But 501c4s are a different type of a classification that can endorse, that can educate voters about about a candidate. All right. And 501c4s are usually groups that are minority groups, that are usually disenfranchised groups, like Latino groups, get out the vote groups, that sort of thing. Point is that they have been, right now in Oregon law, they can have an influence. If they have enough money, they can influence elections. They can participate in elections and doing mailings and making endorsements and helping people get elected. With campaign finance reform, they would not be able to do that. And that's why they pushed back. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't get it on the ballot, is because people were concerned about, once you have power, it's like with Gorbachev, right? One of the things that people may have heard that Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev,
who died today, by the way, or actually he died yesterday.
Yeah. One of the reasons that it didn't work out, there was a lot of pushback from the established leaders of the USSR, and he actually got them to relinquish power, to not fight during the breakup of the transition from the USSR to a Russia state, to what right. And they were saying that how uncommon that is to actually get a majority power. It happened in South Africa. There was an example of South Africa and apartheid and the resistance there. The white minority gave up power.
Yep.
In lieu of a fight. We're trying to retain it. And so that's the challenge with campaign finance reform. You've got these large groups that are benefiting from their political influence.
So what's an attractive alternative to something like Citizens United? So if Citizens United were to be taken down and we did get our campaign finance reform, what would be, because you need to be able to have the voices say what they want. Everybody has an agenda. Mm-hmm. And some are for universal health care, free education, well, publicly funded education, lower property taxes, better management of money, less waste. People have their voice and they want their voice to be heard. Companies are not people. Mm-hmm. So do you just say, hey, companies are not people. We want companies out of the ability to determine the end of an election?
Right. No.
What's the alternative? Because you have the PACs.
The alternative is that you have an election structure that is not impartial to any one particular group based off of money. It's like, for instance, here in the city of Portland, for instance, we actually have campaign finance reform here where they have a public matching system where if you get a donation from a person for $10, it's matched 6-1 from a city supplied fund of X amount. And so so more candidates can participate in the election process and if they go out and they get public support and they get these public donations, they can in turn get this money, tap into this pool of money available to them. Now, other people, if you're self-funding and you don't want to be part of that system, you can do that too, but you're going to be going up against the scrutiny of a lot of people that are in the system. Does that make sense? And so,
yeah, it does. Look at what Patrick had to go through.
Exactly. Patrick Stearns. Exactly. So it is kind of a challenge, but that's one way. And it's all boils down to leveling the playing field, giving the voter as much of an influence as that business that is spending, that will make money off of who gets elected.
Well, what happened to the cap of $2,000 per person?
There's still not in Oregon.
Or $2,500 or something like that.
Well, that's more on a national level. Like, for instance, in a presidential election, you have a cap of $2,800 per cycle per individual.
Right.
In the state, you can give as much as you want, quite frankly.
Well, what would implementing caps do? Wouldn't that handle some of it?
It would. That was also a part of that campaign finance reform package, was the caps on individuals and on entities on how much they can contribute to a municipal race or a statewide race or congressional race, or not a congressional, because that'd be federal law. But so
Right.
yeah, that's another way of doing it. You're putting an artificial cap on how much everybody can contribute. So I tell you, it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. We've seen it in Multnomah County. We've seen it in the city. One of these days, we're going to get it passed here statewide. But it is a challenge because you have all those ingrained interests that are benefiting from the current situation. And
well, yeah. I wonder if a cap is a mitigating source, right? So instead of saying either this or this, why not put forward legislation or request a bill that says, okay, well, we'll keep these PACs, but PACs are limited to giving this much money, and individuals across the board can give this much money.
For statewide elections, it could be done like that. You're right. And legislatively, the Oregon legislature, there's been a couple good champions for campaign finance reforms. State Representative Dan Rayburn and Senator Jeff Golden from Ashland has been an amazing advocate for us. The challenge is, of course, just trying to get politicians that know it's a popular issue, but yet are benefiting from the current situation, getting them motivated to actually vote in favor of legislation.
Wouldn't they have a better chance if it was a level playing field? And then Joe Blow down the street can't say, hey, I know you took $500,000 from Intel, so I'm going to make sure everybody knows that and doesn't vote for you. When the cap could be, $100,000
right, and
to your chosen candidate, then everybody gets that. And people like me or you or Janie down the street can actually participate.
No, I agree with you 110%, Although I will say this, don't discount the ability of the grassroots donation system to make a huge difference. I've seen races where $5 donations, well, let's just put it this way. $5 donations maybe seem small. Mm-hmm. You get 2,000 of them and you're doing pretty good, and you get 2,000 of them by going out and talking to voters, and that's what gets you elected. So I wish
this day and age, couldn't that get you killed too?
I hope not.
That's how it works. That's the direction we're going, right?
This whole demonization of public service, I hate. It frustrates me to no end. And I think part of it is just, it's the Trump influence. It's this, the idea that it's okay to denigrate your opponent if you're for political expediency. You know what I mean? And that's what right. They've done really well, for better or for worse, is just, don't vote for a Dem. Fear. So
anyway. I live here in Molalla, right? And Molalla is one of the redder communities in rural Oregon, I guess. At least that's been my experience. We have some people who run blue, but and we're going to be wrapping this up pretty quick. But they're always complaining about, like, the last time Kate was elected for governor. Oh, Portland is the location that mandates all of our officials in Salem. When there's actually now 4 heavily Democratic counties in the state, and everywhere that's Republican is mostly land, right? So that can't possibly be. What I'm curious from you is to find out what you think the outcome of elections I totally lost the question. I'm sorry. But the outcome elections will continue to run blue even as our red rural communities threaten to leave the state?
No. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying there. And I think, let's put it this way. The saving grace here for the state of Oregon is that, at least in my mind, is the fact that the highest concentration of voters is in the Tri-County area, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas.
Yes.
And out of those three counties, Clackamas, of course, is the most conservative because it has, is just the most conservative. Washington County used to be the most conservative, believe it or not. But because of all of the investment of high tech and all of the things that have been going on over the last decade and a half, 2 decades, it's transitioned. More people have gone into Washington County that have college educated liberals, if you will, and so it's kind of, and the Democratic Party recognized that transition, and the county party, to their credit, Washington County Democrats have done a masterful job in attracting new voters to these and putting up candidates that are really solid and represent a diversity of thought. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We've got some, but now my point is that in a statewide race, statewide races are won and lost in Tri-County area. Kitzhaber, remember, against Chris Dudley? Mm-hmm. Everybody thought Dudley was going to win, and then the final results came in from the Tri-County area, and Kitzhaber won. Kate Brown, same situation when she ran. So everybody waited until, so in other words, if Tina's going to win this race coming up, it's going to be in Multnomah County and her getting out the vote here. Probably, and focusing on Democrats in this area. Yeah, she has to appeal to Lane. She has to appeal to the rurals, but not as much, From a political standpoint, strategy point, you almost have to concede some of those audiences to let Betsy and Christine fight for them. You got to focus on where your real folks are, your biggest audiences, and that'd be the Tri-County area and the Democrats here.
It is.
So that gives me hope. That gives me some hope. And then, and one other thing too. There has certainly been, I brought up the Washington County transition because there has certainly been a statewide transition in the Democrats' representation of Democrats, Republicans as far as rural urban. You're absolutely right. There was a few years back a very hard line between urban, rural, Republican, Dem representation. Some things have changed. Redistricting has changed a little bit of that, because they've split up that urban, rural a little bit, dispersed it a little bit differently. And also, quite frankly, the Democrats have done a good job of getting more Democrats elected in the legislature. So it's not like the House, right, or it's not like the Senate right now, where it's 50-50. It's right. They've done a good job in getting a majority and keeping the majority in the state legislature. So
what are some important voting dates, or what are some important election dates that voters need to know about, or people who haven't registered or whatever?
Well, because we're lucky enough to live in a wonderful state of Oregon, we vote by mail. We'll get our ballots sent to us automatically. You don't have to pay for postage. You just send it back. Those will be hitting mailboxes sometime mid-October. And so you don't, if we lived in a different state, there would be a process. I've really begun to respect the Oregon vote by mail system because I was working in a race in Missouri, of all places. And in Missouri, man, you got one day to vote. And there's a little bit of early voting, but you have to absentee ballot voting is what they call it. In other words, you have to have a real good reason to put it in, like you're sick or you'll be out of town or something dramatic,
Or in the military or something.
Right, in the military or something. But then you have to go to a polling location. Mm-hmm. And you have to know where that polling location is. Mm-hmm. And you have to show up on election day between 7 and 7 o'clock, 7 p. And if you're working, if you're a normal human being with obligations on a Tuesday, it's going to be tough. They had a 17% turnout in this recent primary in Missouri that I was working on. 17%?
Wow.
So low. So low.
That is very low.
Now, take that, from if you're a normal human being in Oregon, with vote by mail, making it more convenient.
Our bad time is 36%.
Exactly.
People are screaming when only 36% vote.
Exactly. So, and that's due to the wisdom of our Secretary of State and our legislature to get vote by mail put in, and our governor. And look what the positive effect of it is. More people are empowered to go vote.
So for those who weren't automatically registered, though you should possibly be, but some may not, or there is a rule that you have to have your designated party on your registration. Where do people go to find out about this?
Your county elections office. So in Multnomah County elections, Clackamas County elections, Washington County elections.
Can you find out online?
Oh, very easily. Just put in the name of your county and put, if you live in Marion County, put Marion County elections, do a quick Google search, and you'll be able to very easily confirm your registration, confirm your information that under your registration, and they'll just automatically send you a ballot, a couple weeks before the election. And then we just, what I love about Oregon voting in Oregon is that you can sit down at your kitchen table. You can sit down and take a relaxed and actually investigate the candidates and do your homework.
Normally, Sherry Hall really let us down this time in the primary. We got one ballot. It came in 2 envelopes. We got one ballot with some people on it for different races, and then the other was the initiatives.
Aye.
And they were both addressed to me. There's 2 people in this household. I'm not a fan of Sherry Hill. I haven't been for a long time.
Well, we have, Sherry Hill's been there for a while. I remember.
Or Hall. I'm sorry, her last name is Hall.
She's been there for a while, and the only way to get somebody like that out is to vote them out. So if you live in Clackamas County and you
vote her out,
you got to vote this woman out, Sherry Hall, the Clackamas County elections chief. But yeah, she's very. She was exceptionally incompetent this year. Let's just put it that way.
I know she might have family things going on. I get it, but come on, really? And she's indignant. I wouldn't be so upset about it, but she's indignant, quite. And I'm like, she's like, I do a good job, but apparently not. Portland is the new Portland governance structure. Mm-hmm. How is that coming into play this year? Or I know some people had some ideas of running, and what is that going to look like?
Oh, that's a juicy one right now, because what's happening is that, so what happened is that the Portland City Charter, which is basically our constitution, our the bylaws of the city, every city has one, most every city has one, mandated that a group of citizens get together every 10 years and review this constitution and make suggestions for improvements. And if they all agree on the improvements to it, it goes straight to the voter, and the voters can vote on it at the next election. So they came up with these changes to the governance structure of the city of Portland. That's been a real big contention over the years. Right now, we have a strong mayor system where the mayor is able to assign the city councilman or city council people to the different divisions of the city, even though they don't have any experience. Right. And so that has created a lot of problems. Many cities have city administrators, city managers, and to handle that sort of thing. And the city council and the mayor just pass laws and set policy. That's all they do. They don't have to manage, and like here in Portland. So the Charter Commission took all that into account, and they came up with this proposal that passed 17-3, super majority within their commission to be able to go straight to the ballot. No And they did this over an 8-month period of time. So there was lots of opportunity for citizen input, right? Tons of opportunity for citizen input. So they come out with this proposal that they changed the government structure here in Portland to from that they hire a city administrator, that the mayor no longer can assign the departments, that they increase the representation from one, they break it up into, what was it? 5 districts, 5 or 6 districts in Portland, and each district would have 3 representatives. So it would increase it from 5-member council to a 12-member council. And also it would implement ranked choice voting, which is a system where you can choose your first preferred candidate, but you can also vote for your second preferred candidate. And that helps to, it's just a fairer system of voting than just majority wins.
Right.
So all of this stuff's coming in this proposal, and it's on the ballot come November. Well, you know, those interests that I was telling you about, those business interests that have lots of money that like to, like things the way that they are.
Yeah. Yes.
They woke up and have started to really push back against this measure, against this change. And they're using But
it's a good idea.
It is. What they're against, though, they're against a couple things. They're against the ranked choice voting. They don't like that. They're against they're against the 12 representatives, the 12 city councilmen versus the 5. What else are they against? So they just don't like it. So they don't like it. They feel like the business community is not going to be represented well, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so they've just started recently to get really aggressive, and they have a PAC, and they're going to put out their own proposal and try to get it on the ballot. And it's been really contentious. But what will be interesting, though, is that in November, no matter what, this is on the ballot. And if the city of Portland votes yes for it, it's going to happen. And I just get the feeling that the people in Portland are disgruntled enough where they will make a dramatic change with the city government. And
it's needed.
It's needed. It is. I just today I was having a conversation with somebody here in the neighborhood about their disgruntlement with the city government, and it's just so. I, as a politico, always try to have faith in my city government, that it's working for me, that, I look at it from the point of view of that person that is the administrator, and they're just a human being trying to implement, blah, blah, blah. But man, I tell you what, man, the city of Portland sometimes can frustrate the heck out of you and not give you answers. It's just frustrating. So
I think it's a sheer volume issue.
Okay.
Because if you look at it over the past 10, 15 years, Portland has grown exponentially and quite quickly. Yeah. Right? 10 or 15 years is not a slow pace for a city to grow as much as Portland has grown, which is indicative of a lot of the issues that we're having.
Amen. And then add in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I have empathy for these folks. I really do. It's a toughie out there to be an elected right now, post-pandemic. But what I can say, it's post-pandemic, and and I think that if they're not responsive, then we've got to, and maybe it is time for a change.
Moses, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you being here with us. You guys, if you didn't hang out for the whole thing, this recording will air on Tuesday, September 6th, I believe, at 8 p.m. in Portland, Tigard, Beaverton, and Vancouver. And you can see it on YouTube after the 6th.
Sherry, thank you. It's so fun to be back here. You know me. I just love it.
We always have good discussions. You're a walking history man. So.
Oh, well, I love you have such strong opinions. I love talking to you about this stuff.
Gee, thanks.